Quebec to impose significant financial penalties against people who refuse to get vaccinated. But remember, it's a choice. It's a choice. Remember, guys, it is a choice. It is your choice to get vaccinated. I'm just going to take away all of your toys, your livelihood, your ability to have fun. I'm going to take away, forcefully, might I add, any ability that you have to live a normal life. But remember, it's a choice. It's completely a choice. Absolutely. It's totally a choice. Uh, Quebec Premier Francois Legault announced the province will apply a significant financial penalty for residents who refuse to get vaccinated against COVID-19 for non-medical reasons. And one thing that we all know is, see, if the punishment for a crime is a fine, then that means that this law specifically is to target the working class. That's that's just a fact. The Premier made the announcement at a news conference Tuesday afternoon, describing the measures as a healthcare contribution, though the exact amount has not yet been determined. These are all just related stories. The province is consulting with the finance minister and its legal advisors about implementing the measure, but Legault already said $50 or $100 is not significant enough for him, so basically he wants it to be a lot bigger. The tax would apply to adults in Quebec who refuse to get their first dose of the vaccine in the next few weeks, according to the Premier. People who have made medical exemptions to vaccination will not have to pay the tax. The unvaccinated will have a bill to pay because there are consequences on our healthcare network, and it's not up to all Quebecers to pay for this, the Premier said. What an interesting point. An interesting point. Yes, you're right. It is not our job to pay for other people's health problems, especially ones that they have caused themselves. You're right. We'll arrive back at that point in a moment. It is a question of equity. Oh, there's that word again. Because right now, these people, they put a very important burden on our healthcare network. And I think it's normal that the majority of the population is asking that there be a consequence, he continued. And yes, we will continue to look at spreading the use of the vaccine passport, but I think we have to go further. You know, standard authoritarian tyrant shit. Basically, this guy should be in front of the Hague. In a Facebook group for thousands of unvaccinated Quebecers, people described the move as psychological warfare and said they wanted to challenge it in court. And yes, that's exactly what it is. It is to intimidate you through financial penalties and to forcing you to go through with a medical procedure that you don't want to go through with, taking away your right to choose. Legal experts told CTV News that the issues raised a lot of interesting questions, but is far from legally clear-cut, with constitutional lawyer Julius Gray saying the outcome would be a close call if it's challenged in court. One unvaccinated man told CTV News that the tax won't spur him to get a shot. It will have no impact on my decision, said Mark Bilek-Lefranc, who lives in St. Eustache, north of Montreal. They've taken everything away from me and they can continue. It wouldn't change anything, he said. And that's, yep, this is just definitely going to make people dig their heels in. If you're trying to force them to go through with it, then they're just going to dig their heels in even more. See if it was introduced here in Scotland and they went, you need to pay a fucking, like, $1,000, like, fine for not getting the vaccination, even if it meant I couldn't pay my bills for the next 2 months, I would pay that. I would turn around and go, here you go, now fuck off. So I'm gonna give you $1,000 to fuck off, Leahy. But yeah, this is going to have the exact opposite effect. All they're going to do is basically they're trying to fuck with these people as much as they can until they eventually break. Which is kind of like the definition of torture. Basically, you push on a person and torture them enough until they finally break and give you what you want. That is essentially what this is. If the healthcare contribution is implemented, they're still calling it the healthcare contribution. Let's call it what it is. It's the seizure of personal property by a government because you're not the government, because you're refusing to go through with a medical procedure that the government is trying to force upon you. Call it what it fucking is. It would arguably be one of the strictest COVID-19 health measures in Canada, happening in a province that is already under a curfew for the second time during the health crisis. However, a few other jurisdictions around the world have opted for similar measures in recent months, including Austria and Greece, both of which created penalties that will take effect in the next few weeks. Austria's in particular is very strict, charging the equivalent of about €3,600 every 3 months to everyone over 14 in the country who remains unvaccinated. Yeah, and your average 14-year-old has €3,600 lying around. Utter scumbags. Utter complete scumbags. You do know that when elections roll around, we're all going to remember what you did. Like, elections are going to happen, and we are all going to remember what you did, right? Just keep that in mind. In a statement, the Canadian Civil Liberties Association slammed the idea of the tax and asked the Legault government to abandon it. Legault is proposing a direct penalty for being unvaccinated, compelling individuals to undergo medical treatment, wrote Cariswell, the association's general counsel. Our charter recognises individual autonomy over our bodies and medical decisions. Allowing the government to levy fines on those who do not agree with the government's recommended medical treatment is a deeply troubling proposition, she wrote. And yes, this is a case of a government forcing you to go through with a medical procedure. One for which we don't have all the science on yet. People can keep saying, oh, well, the science is that this week, the science is that, the science is not yet settled. So we don't know. We don't have all the facts, and yet the government is trying to force you to go through with it. To justify this kind of restriction on constitutionally protected rights, the government must provide a clear and compelling evidence and demonstrate that there were no other reasonable alternatives, of which there are very, very many. However, the governments just want to go right in there with the authoritarian approach because that's what governments do. Making all adults who refuse to be vaccinated pay an expensive health contribution is a radical idea, says Quebec Solidaire. QS health critic Vincent Morisseau said in a statement that the Premier is completely forgetting the vulnerable. There are homeless people with serious mental health problems and undocumented migrants, he said. Morisseau called on the government to publish the legal and scientific options it holds that justify this radical measure. The police will then be able to judge whether this is a public health decision or a public relations decision, he said. Liberal leader Dominique Anglade also criticised the measure in a series of tweets. Today, François Legault has chosen to divide and divert, she wrote, saying that after 12 days of silence, she expected a plan from the Premier. With arrogance, Legault gives us a beautiful smoke show without public health advice, without any details, without having answered questions, and without having consulted the Assembly. Again, he relies on the polls and his political instincts. And then we're getting into like rising hospitalisations and stuff like that. And I think this is all other separate stuff. This is just other stuff that happened in Quebec. But again, okay, so if there are people that, due to their personal decisions, are causing a great strain on your health service, then people shouldn't have to pay for that. I get that. That's fine. That's not a problem. That's not a problem at all. So fat people, smokers, drug addicts, and people who have all made decisions, by the way, they shouldn't be allowed to have any treatment. Basically, people shouldn't be expected to pay for their treatment. For example, I am a very, very heavy smoker. Probably going to get lung cancer one day. Why should all of you have to pay for that? Why? Why should all of you have to pay for that? My decision. Why I fucked up. Okay, so tell you what then. Do the same thing for fat people, drug addicts, and smokers, right? Or people that do any other thing that causes them serious health problems. What about builders who in their 50s, construction workers who in their 50s and 60s develop back problems? Well, that was their decision to work in construction. I see absolutely no reason why I should pay for the, for stupid decisions made by another person. So I absolutely agree. However, you're not doing it for those other things. You're doing it for the vaccinations. And this is the part that really gets me, because everyone's like, why do governments want so hard for people to take these vaccines? Oh, so obviously it's to save people and save lives. Right. Come on, like I know that leftists and vaccine fiends will say things like that as a rebuttal, but let's be real. No matter if you're left or right, we both know the government does not give a fuck if you live or die. Like, yes, we both know that. Anyway, it doesn't matter if you're left, right, or whatever position on the spectrum you're on, right? We both know that the government doesn't give a single solitary shit about you, and it does not give a fuck if you live or die. It could not fucking care less. Yet it is coming in with like these vaccines. Now, there's one thing that's happened for ages as well, is we care about people dying, we care about like death and all that type of stuff. Okay, then solve homelessness, solve the drug problem, solve all of these other bloody things of people dying in poverty. You have a huge problem with people dying, then fix all the problems in Africa and all these third world countries. Yet they have the power to do it, and yet they don't. So the whole, we care about people dying, that argument's right out the window, especially with the way the government's conducted themselves. I mean, we're just out of a 20-odd year war for fucking oil. Right? We care about if people live or die. No, you don't, right? You're not fooling fucking anyone. And we can all agree on that. Yet the government is really hard pushing these vaccines. and they're willing to go further than any government has went in the past for a medical procedure, right? And look, I'm sorry, but that shit just absolutely activates my almonds.